Trump said the US would meet North Korea with fire and fury like the world has never seen. Kim said the US would pay 1,000-fold for its heinous crimes. Trump called Kim Rocket Man. Kim called Trump a barking dog. Trump then tweeted, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who is obviously a madman who doesn't mind starving or killing his people, will be tested like never before. Kim called Trump a mentally deranged US dotard, prompting millions to Google the word dotard. Trump responded, why would Kim Jong-un insult me by calling me old when I would never call him short and fat? Kim said, a nuclear button is always on my desk. Trump responded in a tweet saying, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. Kim then said, my dad's a policeman and I'm nuclear-proof anyway, so there. Trump then said, your dad's a poopy head and I'm everything-proof times a million no returns. Kim then said, your maternal hamster smells like elderberries, an insult which lost much in translation. Trump responded by saying, it takes un to know un, a joke which is much funnier written down. These are the men who this morning discussed the fate of the Korean Peninsula, home to 75 million people. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not the leaders we need, but perhaps they are the leaders we deserve. At a time when global communications is a stinking cesspool of social media rage, this is what emerges. My social media feed is full of people who know how peace will emerge on the Korean Peninsula, and yet they cannot properly use the word there. They're misusing their theirs and would have no clue how to spell that sentence, but they know how to usher in world peace. Trump and Kim are just the incarnations of how our online interactions generally go. Social media seems to be about yelling at avatars of real people. Like this social experiment where New Yorkers were encouraged to boo a picture of a baseball player who had just left their team.
Boo! You suck! Boo, Robinson, you should have stayed here. Winners is in New York, not in Seattle. Boo! Boo!
But when they actually met the player in the flesh, it was a different matter.
That was awesome. Maybe try it again.
Should I try it again?
Yeah.
How you doing, Robbie? Welcome back to New York.
Try doing it one more time.
Boo! Stay in Seattle. We don't need you in New York. Hey! How are you?
Good. How you doing? I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Boo! Whoa!
How you doing? Thanks for the boo.
Yeah, no problem. I won't boo you. I won't boo you. I won't actually boo you. I'll be rooting for you to play well, but not win.
And this is our great hope. Trump and Kim, after all their words, got together this morning face to face, and that is a tremendous achievement. Who knows if their accord will bring lasting change, but this has to be the way forward, treating one another as human beings, and if possible, getting face to face. It's the way of peace. It's what God did. He came into our swirling cesspool, he absorbed the rage and the insults, and in response, he offered his face. Of course, we struck it, yet nonetheless, he rose again to turn the other cheek, to offer relationship once again. If we receive that relationship, that really is world peace. And it might even trickle into our online interactions. Unless you're a dotard. It's the 12th of June, this is Speak Life, and you're watching the LIVEcast.
LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show. LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show.
See you all.
Still chewing on my lunch.
Yeah, sorry about that. you thought I'd be wittering on a little bit longer on the rant.
Normally rambles on for ages and ages. But...
Loads of time. No. Short and to the point. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah.
Emily Wiles says hello. We've said hello back. I don't know if anyone else is watching on Facebook Live. If you're listening later on the podcast, you're missing out on quite
banter.
Quite a treat.
Yeah, no.
Well, you're getting the banter.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't really listening to what you were saying. It just phase out.
Which you can do on a podcast, I guess, a little more. You can listen to us in double speed or something, but you miss our lovely faces.
Yep.
No great loss. Sally.
We've got a few others with us.
Yeah.
Sally says thanks.
Yeah.
You're
Roz
welcome.
Allen. Hello, Roz, from across the water. James, nice to meet you. A recent liker of
regular
Speak
post,
Life.
regular commenter.
And now a regular commenter.
Picking up on those comments there. Good to see you all. Good to have you with us.
Very good. So, how about that meeting between Rocket Man and
Short fat
and
man.
the dotard, whatever that meant.
It's it's a bit strange, isn't it? Like, I don't quite know what to make of it, and I don't think anyone does, do they? No, I mean.
Oh no, everyone knows exactly what to make of it. Like on the surface, that's certainly the way that they tweet.
But is it legit? Like, is people say, is it a propaganda thing for Kim? What's Trump doing? Should you be mixing with dictators?
Right.
All this kind of stuff. It's very.
Yeah.
Don't
talk to strangers.
Yeah.
Don't have face-to-face meetings with tyrannical dictators.
Well, the thing I find a bit bizarre about it is just, they've been talking about North and South and possible, hopefully one day they'd like to see a reunification and stuff. That kind of thing's been thrown around at times.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's this relationship happening now with the States and North Korea. And the question that goes through my mind is, let's say they kind of work this all out.
Right.
Like, what happens to Kim Jong-un and that? Because if they reunify,
right.
I mean, surely it won't be just like, well, you carry on being in charge. It won't work like that. And that seems like...
it might be a devolved parliament, if you like,
But also, I mean, like, even if they come to some agreements, like in the States and that, you kind of think, isn't this a guy who... like blew his uncle apart with an anti-aircraft cannon.
Yeah, there is that.
Like, do you just kind of sweep that under the rug?
Yeah.
What do you do? Or do you say, actually, turns out you're actually a massive criminal?
Yep.
You're
going
human
down.
rights violations.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you supposed to? Because you want it.
Yeah.
It looks like a good thing that's happening.
Yeah.
It's pushing in a direction that at least looks like it could be promising. But you kind of think, how do you work out those bits further down the line?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement, and I'm wary that Roz Allen is there in Ulster, so she can police what I say. But I mean, alongside the Good Friday Agreement, there were all sorts of people, released from prison and clemency and that sort of thing, offered. It kind of does go with the territory,
right?
When you do have to bury the hatchet, or I mean, South Africa, that sort of. What was it called? The Council for Truth and Reconciliation. So Desmond Tutu and others were sort of leading the way in sort of trying to transition from apartheid to non-apartheid, and that seemed to be an interesting way forward in terms of loads of hearings in which the grievances of those who have been downtrodden are heard, and lots of truth was spoken before the reconciliation, which I thought was. I think that's a much more biblical idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than just forgetting the past and trying to erase it, facing the horror of it and then forgiving. Truth and grace going together. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal that they sat down together in the same room, and absolutely, there's all sorts of propaganda going on. And there's all sorts of mixed motives in going on. But, at the end of the day, they signed something that commits to work towards the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
I particularly enjoyed the BBC News article's description. They only came away with that. I was like, a good start. I mean, I've not done a huge amount this morning.
That's it.
Seems like they're doing better than I am.
So, yeah, I mean, Professor Michael McFall, I saw this on Twitter earlier. He's a professor at Stanford University. And he did make an interesting point. He said, how can Trump establish an excellent relationship with a North Korean dictator in 45 minutes, but he can't establish working relationships with our long-standing democratic allies after 18 months?
Yep.
A little reference to the G7 that was held over the weekend. I don't know if anyone saw this photograph, which is extraordinary. Look at that. Merkel kind of laying down the law, and Trump. What's he saying? What's he saying right there?
I think Trump already looks like he's been photoshopped in at this point. Like, he doesn't even look like he's making eye contact.
Doesn't look real, does it? And speaking of Photoshop, people did make use of Photoshop quite nicely. So after that photograph went out, then there was this. which I think perfectly captures the moment. And then everyone on Twitter was calling this a Caravaggio painting.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite, I thought that was quite good. And then this tweeter says, if you're going to refer to a now famous photo as being like a particular artist's style, at least know the difference between Baroque and Impressionism. Then, make it look like that very thing. Caravaggio it ain't. Sheesh. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the internet.
There you go. That's what the internet was made for. It's stuff like that. Forget communication around the world. Memes.
Someone getting angry about the meme.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And correcting the meme. Making his own meme because no one else's meme was quite as correct as his meme. And he didn't use a correct apostrophe. I don't know. So I'm continuing the whole thing. Artists, a particular artist's style, it needs to be artist apostrophe S. Anyway. So
I see. Right.
Can someone Photoshop that in? Can somebody, please? For me, honestly.
But
so yeah.
Was that Professor though? I mean, is he? I can't work out from his thing whether he's just having a laugh with it. He's saying, can't even do this. I'll show you for 45 seconds. Or is he actually saying like, is he actually a bit miffed about the fact that Trump and
Oh yeah, no, he totally is.
Face to face.
Go to his feed and you'll see. Yeah.
Oh right.
Yeah. And you can understand. It's a photo call for Trump. You wonder, but can God use it to bring about peace on the Korean Peninsula? That would be astonishing. And the Berlin Wall came down. Apartheid ended.
And you've got to think, this is surely better than the position we're in where one was shouting at the other across Twitter and backwards and forwards.
This Trump is better than the other Trump.
Yeah.
Let's at least.
Regardless of what you think of Donald Trump, this is probably
a
step forward.
Because they got face to face, and I think that's the beauty of it, having hurled insults at each other over, well, Trump was using social media. I'm not sure they have Twitter in North Korea, so, he had to have state addresses.
But wouldn't it have been more funny if they'd had the courage of their convictions that as they met, they were saying, "No, I'm sitting here with this dotard." Yeah. Or
selfie time.
When they really they just went for it. Part of me would have loved to have seen them just be completely honest.
Okay, Rocket Man. Okay, dotard.
If you said it, just stick with it. Stick by what you said. So
yeah, there was a bit of a massive kind of U-turn about how respectable and honourable Kim Jong-un was and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, yeah, things like that have been said in the history of diplomacy. But it did remind me of that Jimmy Kimmel clip that we saw in the monologue at the start. Just the difference between yelling at an avatar and meeting a person flesh to flesh is just night and day. I don't know if you've ever met someone offline for the first time and you've only ever known them online, but it's a totally different experience to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you're all right online.
Yeah, that's right. And now, oh man, I'm all right when I've got 100 by 100 pixels. That's smudgy thumbnail.
4K,
Yeah, but that Jimmy Kimmel clip. Jimmy Kimmel's the name of the late night TV host who set up the social experiment where people were yelling at the baseballer called Robinson Cano, and. I thought it was hilarious.
It's just perfect. It is brilliant to see the way they change.
You suck! Oh, hey! On a dime.
Oh, man. Yeah, but I wonder if there were any, though. Because obviously they were selected those clips out of that selection. I wonder whether there were any who just went, yeah, you're terrible. I hate you. You really
actually got
suck.
Violent. Actually. No, I don't think so. I think face to face just is incredible, and I think that is the gospel. I think the gospel is that in the midst of these storms of back and forwards and insults, God showed up face to face, and He said, "Do you want a face to face?" And we said, "Nope." We did do the thing that we punched the baseballer in the face. Yeah, God shows up, and we actually punched him in the face.
Yeah.
And then put a crown of thorns on his head and strung him up on a cross. And we actually, so we struck him on one face, and then he rises up from the dead, and he offers us the other face, the other cheek, which is
one face. Two
he's not a two-faced Jesus. It's not a good look. But yeah, that would be the Nestorian heresy, as I'm sure all our viewers know.
Right.
Yeah.
familiar with their story and heresy.
You ought to be. You ought to be. Come on.
I just don't remember anything. That's the problem.
Nestorius is sort of the double-headed monster Jesus. Kind of there's the divine Christ and the human Jesus, and that kind of thing.
Oh.
The two-faced Jesus, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It was condemned at the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD. There you go.
That's good to know.
Hey, not just banter.
We've
Not just banter.
we've all learnt something.
Yeah. And but yeah, no, the gospel is Christ showed up to offer us his face, we struck him, and then he rises up again and turns the other cheek. And if you want that relationship, then that really is peace. That really is reconciliation. And maybe if we know that reconciliation, it might flow out into the rest of life. Maybe.
You'd hope it would, wouldn't you?
You'd hope it would. I mean, I get this wrong. I got into a back and forth with a Muslim on Twitter who I know from my Speaker's Corner days. And so, yes, Speaker's Corner is quite a robust interchange. If anyone's ever been there, Hyde Park Corner on a Sunday afternoon. These days, there's kind of like 200 Muslims and 100 Christians, and they kind of speak. And they dialogue, and it's a robust interchange. And anyway, a guy from there sort of picked up a conversation with me on Twitter, and we were as robust on Twitter as we ever were offline. And yeah, that was unfortunate. We all fall into bad ways of just answering in kind. A harsh word stirs up anger, as Proverbs 15 verse 1, but then it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. And I think that's the great hope, isn't there? And at the end of that conversation, I said, I'm sorry, and hopefully that's the way forward, isn't it? A gentle answer turns away wrath.
Yep.
Maybe. Which is interesting, because that word, turns away wrath, is like... That's how we describe the cross. The cross is a sacrifice that turns away wrath. So the cross is basically, God answering kindly to us when we've only got anger to spread. And then I guess the flip side of that is then when we try to offer kindness to people when they've just been harsh to us, it will feel excruciating. It will feel like a miniature cross.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a sacrifice. It's brutal, isn't it?
It's a brutal sacrifice. But on the far side, hopefully there's the resurrection of face-to-face and peace. Mm-hmm. So, watch this space and just pray for especially the Christians in North Korea. They pray for us, and they pray that us in our relative ease and comfort would use that to spread the gospel. So let's pray for their protection, but also pray that the gospel spreads in North Korea, and that becomes the great source of peace there in North Korea. Brilliant. Are we going to do anything else about stuff in the news? What else is in the news?
I don't think there was anything. Well, obviously there is stuff in the news, but
that's it.
That's it. Nothing else has happened.
That's pretty much it. We won't talk about the World Cup yet. There'll be plenty of time for England to be depressed.
Oh man, yeah.
In the coming weeks, so let's not preempt that depression.
We got a question here about the Kim Trump thing. Do you think it's possible, or do you guys think it's possible Kim has become a Christian in secret?
Wow.
Wouldn't that be great?
Wow. Yeah.
That's an interesting. It's possible, isn't it?
Who would he tell?
Yeah.
What would it look like?
And you become, yeah.
I mean, Nebuchadnezzar, right? I mean, he had his, Daniel 4 moment. He's, obviously this incredibly powerful, proud despot who gets humbled, and then he tells people about it, though, doesn't he? Like he then does right to his whole kingdom and kind of say there's no other God but the Most High and things like that. But interesting.
Whether because even though we assume he has this kind of ultimate power there, as he is, if you wonder, could he just come out and say that? Right. Would there be sufficient power to turn on him within the forces beneath him? Yeah. So that would make him hesitant to just come out and say, "Oh well, I'm in charge and we're doing this now." I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think he'd last long. Would he?
Yeah. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like how because it is my understanding is it's slightly different to a political leader, isn't he? In the sense that there's more of a worship thing going on.
Yeah.
So perhaps if they have that that almost divine sense.
Yeah.
Maybe that puts
Yeah.
people off going against them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe
Could be a Constantine moment, and then
yeah,
you Christendom 2.0 begins in Pyongyang. How about that?
Yeah.
That's that. You heard it here first. If you're looking for Christendom 2.0, and who isn't?
Well, at the end of the day, you just don't know, do you?
Yeah.
Who knows? It's possible that this, if someone like Saul can become Paul.
Saul can become Paul. Nebuchadnezzar can,
Who knows
converted
what can happen to this guy?
Cyrus's own heart can be turned, and Constantine, and who? Yeah. It's an interesting thought experiment, and let's be praying for it. And it's interesting. I've got a prejudice against a kind of an idea of a top-down thing. I'd far rather it be this grassroots, thing, and somehow the church triumphs just by, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church there in North Korea, and somehow. But actually, a lot of global change, it is top-down. Yeah. It is top down, and so
I can understand. I mean, because I've read about the Constantine stuff. That I can't remember where I read it now, but I swear I read someone saying that, in a sense, that was the birth of nominal Christianity.
Sure.
Because Christianity became the religion of the state, and so it was advantageous to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Just from kind of social and economic purposes, and therefore, so what you got was a lot of kind of watered down people just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian."
Right.
Right, and so there was a positives, but there were also negatives to it. So
no, absolutely,
and you can see in this country how actually we're coming out of that kind of nominal Christian thing, aren't we? People were less likely to identify perhaps as Christian, although there's still loads who do. Yeah, but we've certainly had a kind of my grandparents would have certainly grown up in what I would describe as a nominal Christianity.
Yeah,
on the whole,
and now it's nominal atheism, isn't it? I think I
Which
always
you
say
could check out Jordan the Unbelievable. Have you seen the Unbelievable?
Yeah,
Jordan
yeah.
Peterson, saying about how he doesn't think a lot of people who claim they're atheists actually are atheists.
No,
they're living out something else.
No,
something very different.
Yeah.
So that's the Unbelievable big conversation.
Big conversations that they're having.
Which is great. So the first one's out, isn't it? Jordan Peterson and Susan Blackmore.
That's right. Yeah.
So I watched that the other day.
Yeah, very good. And they got some great ones lined up. They've got Steven Pinker lined up, Daniel Dennett lined up. They've got, who's the Australian philosopher who says infanticide is cool? What's his name?
Singer,
Peter Singer.
Peter Singer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
not a singer. Singer,
hum me a few bars.
Kylie? No.
Kill all your babies, kill all your babies. It's okay, says Peter Singer. I don't know.
That's the big conversation show, I think, isn't it? People can find that.
Yep.
If they want to check out those, they're worth a look.
Yeah,
but again, I mean, the thing I was frustrated about by that whole thing, we're verging off topic here, but
no, it's good.
We couldn't. Justin Brierley tried to pin down, pin Jordan Peterson down near the end and say, "What do you actually think about Jesus and whatnot?"
Yeah.
And I think even Susan said, you're dodging the question here.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a man? And you're saying we've all got this bit of divine in us, but do you think he was some?
What about Jesus?
Yeah, more divine in some way and did miracles. And he finishes by basically saying, "Render to Caesar
what is Caesar's,
to Caesar. What
to
render
God,
to God what is God's. That's a miracle.
It's the separation of
church and
state.
That's a miracle.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with that."
Yeah.
And you're like,
yeah,
come on, Jordan.
Yeah. At that stage, you just wonder, does he worship the West rather than worshiping Jesus?
Sure, yeah.
I don't think he worships Jesus.
No.
But is it the West and this idea of yeah.
But it was a fascinating conversation still, and I think the rest are going to be really exciting. And there's lots of big names, like you say, in it.
Yeah.
So it's by no means kind of
Darren Brown's
on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of people that actually, I think my atheist friends would know about,
right?
Or my atheist,
as
Jordan Peterson would say, atheist friends.
But they're not really, are they? Yeah. And I think Peterson is getting that idea of atheist nominalism. I think he's getting that from Nietzsche. He's a big fan of Nietzsche, an existentialist kind of idea, because Nietzsche kind of critiqued humanism. That's kind of atheism as Christianity light. That's just Christianity light. You've just swapped out God for the good, and now you're worshipping the good rather than God. You have no foundations for good and evil, for goodness, truth, beauty, and love, and all those sorts of things. But you're still essentially Christians. You just say you don't believe in God, but you live in a Christian universe.
Yeah,
very essentially. So yeah, I mean, and I just, when people say that they're atheists, to me, I don't really believe them. In the same way, I always say, if you're over 65 and you say you're a Christian, I don't believe you. I'm not rude about it. I don't poke you in the chest and say, prove it. Prove it, old man. What's your prayer life like? I don't do that. But by the same token, if someone's under 35 and they say they're an atheist, I don't believe them.
Right, yeah.
Because both kinds of people, it's just has been very easy for them to take a label, put it on, walk out into the world as a Christian in the past, an atheist today. You don't have to put 5 minutes thought into the metaphysics involved in any of these things. It's just a label, right?
Sure, yeah.
So Christians, don't be put off when, your mate's an atheist. Well, like we so often think, oh, my mate's an atheist. Oh no, they're like doubly behind the eight ball. Not only have they not got a concept of deity, they also don't believe that Jesus is that concept of deity.
Yeah, but I mean, and I think the interesting thing is, there'll be loads of people who we might consider as atheists, atheist friends, but yet, there's loads of people who are then kind of into kind of very, spiritual stuff.
Right.
Despite the fact that they're denying a kind of religious thing.
Yeah.
They're, organised religion is often the phrase, isn't it? I don't really do organised religion.
Right.
But yet, how many are reading horoscopes? How many are, interested in the paranormal and all that kind of stuff? And there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying these people aren't really atheists.
No.
They think there is something beyond,
Right.
Someone I know just, saying something like, I know I'm going to see this person again, that kind of, and you go, where'd that come from? Because as far as I know, this person's an atheist. And I'm like, well, where's this concept come from? Mm-hmm. So I think there is a sense of that nominal atheism, and or it's like with the evangelism stuff that's been going on in Eastbourne in the last week. Something like 1,000 people talked to in the streets. 250 people prayed with. And you think most of those people, I imagine, if you would think they're probably a lot of atheists. But yet they're happy for you to pray with them. So why do they want prayer? What do they think that's doing? There's something going on in there, something else. But
I was part of this. I was there was about 60 odd people who went out from Eastbourne this last week and got into conversations with people, and I got into conversation with a guy called Kane, self-identified atheist. There was the first words out of his lips, really. Oh, no, sorry, I'm an atheist. And we just, within 30 seconds, he was saying, well, I definitely believe there's something more. I'm just not sure about it, And you just, like, and again, it's this nominal atheism. And I'm not saying there aren't really thought through, and if you're watching and you're an atheist and you say, I've read all the books and I've thought this through. Yep, fine, great. But just as I admit that there are nominal Christians, can you admit that there are nominal atheists? And I think there's a heck of a lot of nominal atheists, and we just need to be not put off by that, and just say, oh, which God don't you believe in? And they end up describing some kind of guy with a beard and a lightning bolt ready to hurl, and you say, oh, I don't believe in Thor either.
Big hammer.
I'm not really into the Thor thing either. Can I talk to you about Jesus? Which God don't you believe in? And then to the nominal Christian, I say, well, which God do you believe in? Because it's not always obvious that...
And that's actually been, one of my things I've been relatively big on in some of my preaching to Christians has been, can we stop talking about the generic God?
Yeah.
And it was the whole thing, when you say God, it was like, what are some of the words we use as Christians that people outside the church don't get? And of course, I had people discuss it, and, of course you get like sin and stuff like that. And I think there were a few others. I can't remember exactly what they were. And I said, sin was definitely one of them that I'd kind of thought to myself. But the big one is God.
Right.
When you say God,
right,
we're just assumed suddenly, well, we're all talking about the same thing. Yeah. But of course, people aren't hearing that. And I think we touched upon it the other week. When we mentioned about how I preached on the Loki God, from Avengers. Like, God is this figure who he's a power figure who comes to crush you and submit you. Yeah, and all that. And we'll maybe touch on that a bit in the freedom thing anyway. But people are thinking of, like you say, the old man with a beard sitting on a throne in the sky.
Yeah.
Who wants to just be in charge.
Right.
And you go, hang on, this is a bit different to when you talk about God and I talk about God, we're talking about different things.
Yeah.
And I just see a lot of Christians talking very generically about God.
Yeah. Big mistake.
Which I think, and hence why it's such a good thing, I think, with stuff like 3-2-1, that we start with the Trinity.
Yeah, right.
And there's often this sense. I even had someone say to me once, a very competent, Christian person in ministry, say to me once, "Oh, you're not one of those people who thinks we should talk about the Trinity and evangelism, are you?"
I hope not.
But there's this sense, I think, amongst Christians that the Trinity is it's like the advanced level Christianity. Once you've got all your basics, then if you feel like doing a bit more study, you can get into the deep stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, more and more, it is the distinctive thing, isn't it?
Right.
What makes our God different from Allah or a lot of other gods.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Trinity, the very nature of God himself.
Yeah.
But we're so reticent to do that, and we so often talk generically.
Yeah. Huge mistake. And then, because we claim to be people who believe in the exclusivity of Christ, but you shoot yourself in the foot if you first of all define God in this really generic sense. Okay, there's some kind of, spiritual Novocaine in the ninth dimension, this vibe. Let's call him God, right? And like, everybody believes in that, right? And then you shoot yourself in the foot, because then you say, oh yeah, and by the way, this guy Jesus over here, he's the only way that you get to that other massive, there's this incredibly broad generic reality over here called God, and then there's little Jesus over here. And then you start, then the exclusivity of Christ sounds like the most narrow, ridiculous thing in the world. It's like, you gotta squeeze through this thing called Jesus, and then you get to the God. Whereas if you just bite the bullet and you believe in the exclusivity of Christ from the outset, then you just say, okay, when I'm thinking about God, I'm thinking about a bleeding victim with his arms outstretched to the world, loving his enemies, right? That's what I'm thinking. I don't know what you're thinking about, but let's just so we're on the same, sheet. I think Jesus, and therefore you believe in a Jesus-shaped God and a God-sized Jesus, and then it's not this weird kind of, I got to squeeze my way through the narrow Jesus way to get to the big God thing. And it's just good news, because you're just saying, the only God that there is the Jesus God.
Which is always why I always found it so hard. The kind of classic ways I've been taught to share the gospel, you've got the kind of, God creates the world and he creates people and it's all good. People rebel against God and there's judgment, there is the wages of sin is death. And it's like, okay,
right. Yep.
And now, here's Jesus.
Who's this guy?
And Jesus is God. And I remember doing this to teenagers in secondary schools, and they'd be like, hang on a second, I thought Jesus was the Son of God. Well, he is the Son of God, but he's also God. Well, hang on, which is... And you're going, and you're kind of this backpedaling, kind of going, oh man, I've...
And then you're starting to think, maybe Trinitarian evangelism has a place.
Maybe I should have started there,
Right.
Right. So I think it is much better to start with that. Start with the Trinity. Just lay out who God is.
Well, the thing is, if Jesus comes in late, you've got two options. Okay, if you've already defined God and you've already defined man, then Jesus comes in, and then now you've got a choice. So who is he? Is he other than God? If he's simply the Son of God, then okay, he's less than God. So he sinks down into the line of the prophets, and you've got Islam, right?
Yeah.
Or you just say, oh no, he is God, right? And then that's the heresy of...
Oh, one of those Trinitarian ones.
One of those Trinitarian...
Like
modalism,
Patrick.
That's modalism.
Patrick.
That's modalism, Patrick. You need to... Yes, see that.
Lutheran satire
Lutheran
on YouTube,
satire.
If you don't know what we're talking about there. St. Patrick's bad analogies.
We don't know our heretics, but we do know Lutheran satire. So at that point, Jesus then is the God that you began with. It is the Father turns into the Son.
Yeah, you get this sense of God has come out of heaven, almost like heaven's empty. And
Yes.
God's just come down
Right.
and wandering around and is limited there.
Yeah, and then people always ask, well, who's he praying to? Because he's praying all the time.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
if he's paying a debt to God, I thought he was God. What's going on? And it's...
Well, he's like steam and water.
That's modalism. And it just doesn't work. And actually, it makes you think that actually the Trinity clarifies rather than complicates. When you're not Trinitarian, that's what complicates your evangelism.
Yeah, and I think as well, sometimes we feel the reason we struggle with not wanting to explain the Trinity is because we feel we don't have the how can God be three and one thing. We feel we don't have the perfect. We're looking for an analogy, and we don't have a proper analogy.
Man.
But it's kind of okay just to go, well, this is what it is.
It's what it is.
Three persons in one,
One God.
Oh,
yeah.
God. There you go.
Three who's, one what.
Yeah.
There you go.
And just let it be.
Right.
And go
Yeah,
from
if
there.
there's anything worse than Trinitarian analogies, it's our perceived need for them. Like, why do you think you need one? Why like...
Yeah, that's true. It's not like Scripture lays anything else out, is it?
No.
There's an analogy for it. So
Yeah, rather the opposite. Isaiah says, "To whom shall you compare me?" And we're like, I know. How about the
three-leaf
three
clover.
states of Asia? Or an egg? Or you know how with a banana, you put your finger down there and you get three verses. Behold our God. It's like, to what shall you compare
banana.
me? I give you
the banana.
the banana. Whereas actually, so I kind of push back when people say, so you begin with the Trinity. I want to say I begin with Jesus. And it's just that Jesus' doctrine of God, Jesus' doctrine of the world, Jesus' doctrine of you is what gives you 3, 2, 1. So when you begin with Jesus, but as soon as you've got Jesus, he's the Son of the Father, full of the Spirit. And, you can't be anything but Trinitarian.
Sure, yeah.
And that sort of hopefully staves off a little bit of the accusation that, we're meant to begin with a creed or something, or, begin with a philosophical statement about threeness and oneness. I don't care about philosophical statements about threeness and oneness, but when you begin with Jesus, the only doctrine of God you can have is Trinity.
And I suppose it gets difficult, doesn't it? Because you can easily, if you start just with the generic God, you can easily end up almost having Jesus, like you say, as this other figure who comes to save us from the big bad figure in the sky.
Yeah.
Jesus is the one who does all the nice stuff, like coming and dying for us. And there's this nasty figure up there who he's trying to placate.
Right. In the Cross of Christ, John Stott says that's the big problem with our doctrines of the atonements. Like we can't understand the self-substitution of God that's happening at the cross unless we're Trinitarian. Because if we're not Trinitarian, then we've just got, who's this guy who just rocks up and God just zaps him with a thunderbolt so that he can zap me with blessings. Like.
Yeah.
And then you say, and now will you trust God? Like, no. If that's what he does to Jesus.
That's his son, right? No.
But if it's God in Christ reconciling the world to himself, then that's a Trinitarian doctrine of the atonement. And it's,
Yeah, it just paints a very different picture, doesn't it? Very different picture.
Yeah.
Entirely.
Yeah. How did we get onto this?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We started with Jordan Peterson. We
Nietzsche.
moved on to Jordan Peterson and
because
nominal atheism, nominal Christianity.
I think we're sponsored by Jordan Peterson, and we cannot go an entire episode without mentioning him. But yes, because that was part of the big conversations and things like that. I don't know why we got onto that though. I've got a friend who can trace back every single bifurcation in the conversation, and he says, this is when we talked about that, and then before that we talked about that.
Really?
Isn't that a weird skill? It's like,
is it a condition?
No, it's so not what I can do. I can't do anything like that. Carmen Chi says, loving this chat. Thank you, Carmen.
Good.
I'm sure you wrote that before we just went off the rails.
So this is not at all scripted now. It's just completely
We are off
just
the
saying whatever
script.
comes into the top of my head.
Random. So anyway, we've saved the world with Kim
World
and
peace
Trump.
is brought about, or will be soon.
Because it's about face-to-face, people. It's about face-to-face.
We say to you through the medium of your screen.
Well, this is an image at least. Good. Shall we talk about the thorny question for this week?
So the thorny question this week was, won't Jesus rob me of my freedom?
Yes.
Which, is that your answer? Oh, wow, this has got awkward all of a sudden.
No, is that wrong? What?
Yeah, so we think about this question, won't Jesus rob me of my freedom? And I suppose that ties in slightly with what we talk about defining God, is that people often think of God as that figure, as we said, the Loki figure who wants to come and take your freedom.
Yeah.
I think there's a great scene in the Avengers film, the first Avengers film, where Loki comes and he says, I come with a gift, the gift of...
I want to
set you free from freedom.
Free from freedom.
Free from freedom.
Yeah.
And he says, freedom is humanity's great lie.
Right.
It, which actually, we touch upon a little bit in the beginning of the video, don't we? That who is truly free?
Yeah.
Because we're all enslaved. The Bible talks about being slaves to sin.
Right.
But even outside of that, I remember a friend at university saying to me, she couldn't understand how I could be a Christian. She said, I just don't understand how you can have something outside of you that is your, that is in control of you. So as you want to do, and I'm thinking, well, and at the time, I didn't really know what to say, but of course, the truth is, I mean, she as much has things outside of her which are in control of her,
Right.
As anyone does,
Right.
Even on the most basic levels of, you're not free to walk down the street and just stab someone in the face,
Right.
And I think that's a good thing.
Right.
Generally,
Yeah.
not generally all the time. It's not excusable
There are
in any.
exceptions.
But that this illusion of freedom,
Yeah.
and again, I suppose part of that comes in our evangelism, that we can perpetuate the illusion of freedom in our evangelism sometimes.
Ooh.
That
Go on.
we talk about, you're on the throne, or you're on the throne of your life.
You could call your evangelism the choice we all face.
Yeah.
Is there anyone from Sydney watching? I don't know.
But this idea, of course, that people are in a position, either we've rebelled against God or we've submitted to God.
Yes.
And we need to make this choice to come back to God.
Carmen is from Sydney, I've just seen. As is Eleanor Greenwood. So,
they can't reach us here. But what were we saying? So this idea that you need to make a choice. It's like we're these free beings who have actively gone our own way,
Yes.
and now need to come back and stop being so rebellious. And obviously there's elements of that which is true, but the Bible so often talks about us being slaves and captives and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think when you talk, so again, part of my issue in some of that evangelism has been, we say to people, you're rebellious. Look, you do this. Have you ever stolen anything? Paper clips from work or whatever. 'Cause God, we like to make God sound really petty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they say, oh yes, of course I've stolen paper clips, and we say, oh well, you're a thief and you're going to hell. And you just think that sounds like the most ridiculous thing, and no wonder people sit there and balk at that. But actually, and I think though that when you start talking about what about those things that enslave you in your nature and your very being, so being rather than behaviour, everyone can connect with that. I think everyone can connect with don't you stuff up, don't you tell yourself you're not going to do that again, but yet you find yourself doing it.
Right.
Don't you kind of find yourself sometimes letting yourself down and whatever it is. I think those deeper kind of drives.
Yeah. And is it tied to a doctrine of God as well? So if God is simply a power above you, then what is the punchline to that gospel presentation going to be? Like, it must be bow. Like, it's got to be that. Submit. And there's a great religion out there, and if you want to go and do that, go for your life. There's 1.6 billion of them, you know, and there is a power above, and the whole doctrine is that we are to bow before that power above, and the very essence of it is submission. And within Muslim countries, the number one name for boys is Abdullah, which means a slave of Allah, know, and that's the highest and best that you can be, is a slave of Allah. But if God is a father loving his son in the joy of the Spirit, and the son comes to be, becomes your brother in order to invite you into the family, then you can be a heck of a lot more than a slave. You can actually come home to family love.
Be a child of God. Come sit on the throne.
Come sit on the throne. Isn't that interesting that the Bible ends, in Revelation 3, that actually the great promise to the seventh church is that come down and sit with me on my throne, says Jesus, just as I sat down on my Father's throne. So in a sense, the gospel is, at the beginning, Adam abdicated his rule, like he was meant to rule and reign, in obedience to God's word, absolutely. But he abdicated that rule, and he listened to the voice of his wife, who listened to the serpent, and was kind of the great reversal of rule. It wasn't, he didn't take charge.
Yep.
He abdicated. The great problem was that man abdicated, not that man, ruled. Is that man? I mean, I know that there are other ways of conceptualizing that are also true, but here's one perspective: man abdicated, then Christ came and said, "Now join me on my throne."
Yep.
which is the opposite of, your big problem is that you're on the throne and now get off.
Yeah, very much so. It's very different, isn't it? Very different indeed. But was it Martin Luther who said something like people are ridden like a beast, either ridden by God or Christ or by the devil?
By the devil or God.
And
Yeah.
There's no kind of like middle ground.
Yeah.
And that's where I know both you and I have used that the illustration from the Mitchell and Webb sketch. Are we the baddies? Where they're Nazi soldiers and they're kind of looking around and they begin as they weigh up the evidence to go, hang on, there's a skull and crossbones. Why is there skull and crossbones on everything?
Why are we wearing skulls and crossbones?
What kind of army marches under skull and crossbones?
Skulls are quite funny. Pirates wear skulls.
And there's this whole bit where they're discussing that, and there's this moment of realization where one of them just goes, Hans, are we the baddies? And I think that's what it's like with, I've definitely preached, I think it was on Ephesians 2, saying, that as we look at ourselves, that should be our realization. Are we the bad guys? Oh, actually we are.
Yeah.
Enslaved to
right.
sin, the world, the devil, or the flesh, the world, and the devil.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm over here.
Right.
Independent. Woo, go me.
Yeah,
I'm so free.
Right.
It's you're enslaved to flesh, world, and the devil.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're great sometimes at doing that, saying that in our evangelism. Tends to be more rebellious. And I think we've talked about it before. It's great for the rebellious 14-year-old teenage boy.
Right.
And we often reduce it, don't we? I see a lot of it in youth work, and I don't like it. It's the sin, when they say sin stands for shove off God, I'm in charge, no to your rules, or whatever it is.
The acronym, yeah.
The acronym there, which, in one sense is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if you leave that purely as your definition, I mean, I've said a few times that the problem I have with it is that says nothing to the legalistic teenager sitting there going, well, I'm not saying shove off God. I'm saying, I want to be good and I'm trying my best, and actually trying to obey the law.
I'm the faithful one.
Yeah, exactly.
So unchanging. Yeah.
So actually there needs to be more than that.
And it also doesn't reach, I often say it doesn't reach the 3 M's. It doesn't reach the Muslim, the meth head, and the mother, right?
Yep.
So the Muslim immigrant who is like sending every penny home, who's working himself to the bone, who, is serving Allah in all that he tries to do, that man is still sinful and enslaved, and he's still sinning, right? But do we have a definition of sin that takes account of that? Or the meth head who's not trying to rule his own life, in fact, he is abdicating.
Giving it over.
Totally abdicating. Or and the mother, is just because of the alliteration, but the single mum who has given herself to unworthy man after unworthy man after unworthy man, and those men are sinners too. But if she is a sinner and everybody's a sinner, what does her sin look like? It doesn't look like she's trying to take charge of her life. She's actually abandoning her life in all sorts of wrong ways.
Yeah.
And that too is wrong, Yeah,
absolutely.
So what kind of definition of sin? And so when we ask the question, will Jesus rob us of our freedom? I think one of the first things we need to say is, what freedom? Rob us of what?
Like, what now?
We don't have it. And that's kind of where our video begins. So should we have a look at just a couple of minutes of this first video, which includes a terrific comedy clip from Key and Peele. We hope you enjoy it.
Christians sometimes wear t-shirts saying Jesus saves. And sometimes atheists reply, Jesus slaves.
Ooh, rush me to the burn unit.
But maybe the atheists have a point. It seems like bringing God into your life could only limit your freedom, right? Well, Jesus disagrees. He insists that he hasn't come to take our freedom because we don't have any. In a famous passage about freedom, Jesus says, whoever sins is a slave to sin. And that means all of us. We're all addicted to being in charge, addicted to being right, addicted to short-term pleasures that only end up enslaving us. In our bid for independence, we run away from our home in God and we get lost. Like the prodigal son from Luke 15, far from home, we've chased a false view of freedom and have only wound up enslaved.
That's because freedom is not about making your own truth, it's about submitting to it. We often think that freedom means not having any restrictions on what we do, but true freedom is not the absence of restrictions, it's the presence of the right restrictions that fit with the givenness of your nature. So for example, you'll often hear people say that if you put your mind to it, you can do anything you want.
I can fly!
fly. Anybody can fly. If you believe in yourself the way I believe in myself tonight, you will fly.
And what's next for Charlie Sanders and the Orange?
Kids, you can actually fly.
No, not literally.
Yes, literally, kids, young kids. I want you to go up on your roofs right now.
Wait, what?
Fly into the night sky.
Okay.
People will see you flying, and you can do anything. You can do anything.
That makes for a great motivational talk. But you also need to face reality.
First and foremost, I just want to say the 12 families who lost children, I'm sorry. My statements were irresponsible. I have subsequently looked up the terms literally and metaphorically and found that whereas I was not incorrect, they did not mean what I thought they meant.
Whereas I was not incorrect. They don't mean what I thought they did.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Key and Peele. You can fly. No, you can't. No, you actually can't. Actually, reminded me the fly thing. When my mother dropped me off for the last time at university, Freshers Week, and I still remember we'd sort of unpacked the last box and she was about to return to the car and drive back home and to leave me into the freedom of Freshers Week. I remember with a tear like coming down the cheek. She hugged me and her last words to me were, "Glen, just fly, Glen, just fly." And that's kind of how you feel, isn't it? You feel that that's freedom. Freedom is to be released into Freshers Week, where you could go anywhere and do anything, become a whole new kind of person. But of course, in Freshers Week, you've never seen such lost people in your life. I mean, physically, no one knows where anything is.
That's true.
No one knows where the library is. Of course, 3 years later, they still don't know where the library is. But still, But then the wisdom is that you've got to find yourself. But isn't it ridiculous? If you're lost and you find yourself, you've just found a lost person.
Yeah, still lost in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, I need to find myself, but you're lost. Yeah. Finding a lost person is never much help. So still lost. And isn't it interesting? Like our modern version of freedom sounds a lot like the biblical definition of lostness.
Mm.
Our human view of freedom is that we run away from home, we've got the wind in our hair, the horizon beckons, and we're just by ourselves. And actually the Bible is like, oh, okay, so you're a runaway from home, you're all by yourself. The money's going to run out, isn't it? And you'll find yourself in a pigsty, and that's called being lost. That's not called being free.
Yeah.
So we actually need someone to come and find us and bring us home, which I guess that's what Jesus has come to do.
Yeah.
Not to cramp your style or rob you of your freedom, but to reveal to you, nope, you're not free. You're actually a slave. Let me bring you home.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned, don't we, that you can have freedom doesn't mean, like you say, no restrictions at all. And we use the illustrations, don't we, of the doctor telling someone as they get older, now you can't just eat whatever you want. Now you're going to have to. If you want to stay healthy, then you probably need to restrict what you're doing here. You have to limit your freedom, or the musician who limits their freedom of their time or whatnot.
By practicing.
By practicing all those things. Yeah, so the idea that you can just do anything. Right. And that's what being free is.
Such a nuts definition of freedom, isn't it? Like, that you can go anywhere and do anything. Like, it's so limited, which is what's ironic about it. And yet, Jesus confronts these people in John chapter 8 who thought that they were free. And like he says in John 8, verse 31, to the Jews who had believed in him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And it's such a glorious phrase that you think it should be cross-stitched onto a wall hanging, and the truth will set you free. But it's really insulting, because he's saying, you guys are liars and slaves.
Yeah. Right. By implication, you are not free. If someone says you will be set free.
You are deluded, right? Yeah. You need the truth because you're deluded. And you're slaves. And of course, they then go and prove how deluded they are and how enslaved they are by saying, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we should be free? And you're like, the descendants of Abraham are almost definitionally slaves. Like,
what was that big thing that happened to you guys? It was Egypt somewhere.
It's like, who haven't they been enslaved by?
Yeah.
It's not just the Egyptians, but, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Medes, the Greeks. And can you imagine being a Roman centurion just overhearing them saying,
I'm sorry.
not slaves of anyone. Okay, yeah, whatever. So it just goes to show how very deluded we are and how very enslaved we are. And then Jesus explains at verse 34, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Which is interesting because, like, sin in the Bible, it's not just, transgressing and doing naughty things, but it is that matter of the heart. And it's that matter of what it is that you love has been twisted and perverted and changed and takes you down the wrong path. And that's what's enslaved you. Which, again, makes you think, actually, our modern notion of freedom is pretty similar to the Bible's notion of sin. Like, our modern notion of freedom is follow your heart.
Yeah.
Right? And the Bible is like, yeah, well, where's that going to get you? The pigsty.
Yep.
And then, beautifully, Jesus says, now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. So actually, he's bringing back that language of family. And again, here's the Trinity. The Son of the Father becomes your brother, joins you in the pigsty, takes responsibility for all that sin, rises up again to bring you to the family home. And then, when you're home, that's when you're free, right? I think that I want to find myself. Actually, I want to find home, And then when I'm home, I can just be myself. I don't have to find myself. I can just be myself. And that's what freedom really is. And from the outside, that kind of love relationship looks like it comes with a lot of strings attached. It might look like it comes, when you get married, you're like, all your single...
The
ball and chain, innit? But, as we say in the video, there are a lot of cultures where when you get together with somebody, you inscribe your initials and their initials on a lock, and you lock yourselves together, put it on the bridge, throw away the key, because you're saying, actually, I want to be joined to this person forever, and that doesn't feel like slavery. That feels like love, feels like freedom, A different idea of freedom. But it's an idea of freedom that really takes into account our humanity, because if we were made to be an island, if I was made to be an island, an individual, a decision-making individual who can do anything and go anywhere, then maybe freedom would be what we understand it to be in the West, my ability to go and do anything. But if I belong to you and you belong to me, and if we are these communal beings, then my very identity is caught up in relationships that bring with them bonds of love, but if you see it from just the individualistic Western perspective, then those things are just shackles that must be thrown off. But to throw them off is to throw off who I am, because I'm a creature in relationship with others. So freedom's got to be a relational thing. Coming home to love.
Yep.
So come home, everyone, to the love of Jesus who sets us free even from ourselves, which is the biggest slavery we can have. Brilliant. Oh, I think that'll do us for this afternoon.
Yeah, had a good one.
It's been a good one. Carmen Chi says it's a good one, so that's good enough for us. Thank you, guys. Please do keep chatting in the comments, and I'll have a little bit of time to respond to comments now. But if you do not already like us on Facebook, please do go to the Facebook page, give us a like, and even prioritize us in your feed, because otherwise, I don't know about your Facebook feed, but I only ever hear from the same 12 people over and over and over again. And so if you want to actually hear from us, prioritize us. See first, isn't that what they should click?
Yep, I think it's at the top of the page, Speak Life page. There's a section I think that says follow, or something like that. Click on it, and you've got an option there to click see first in your newsfeed. So if this or other pages are things you want to see and not miss, click on it, and you won't miss us.
Top tip. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you like listening, if you're a podcast kind of a person, go and search for the Speak Life podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll get a version of this on Friday. So next week on the LIVEcast, I'm not going to be here in person, but I have recorded an interview with Andrew Wilson, which was a terrific back and forth between him and myself, where I tried to convince him that the Good Samaritan was actually a parable about Jesus and the gospel. And you can tune in next week and see if Andrew was in any way persuaded by that kind of interpretus maximalism. But so that's next week, and he'll be talking about his book, Echoes of Exodus. And we'll have another Thorny question coming out on Monday.
Great.
Good. Well, good being with you, Paul.
And you.
Alrighty.
Fun.
God bless. See you
Take
next
care,
week.
people.